Hello there. This is Dr. Craig Hain, and I'm with Aaron Farley today, who is the headmaster and the teacher of Grace Christian Academy. And this is an interview with Aaron about his experience in Grace Christian Academy and experience with Triad Math. Now, a little later on in the video, I'll show you my webpage and a lot of information you can get. And I'm the CEO of Triad Math Inc. And for the last few months, Grace Christian Academy has been using our program. And I want Aaron to share with you the experience that he's had and Grace Christian Academy's had with Triad Math, so that you, as a leader of Christian Academy, can learn what you would want to know from Aaron about it. So, hi, Aaron.
Hi there. Glad to be here.
I'm pleased to have you. And so let's start out, Aaron, by you telling folks about yourself, your background, Grace Christian Academy.
Sure. So my name's Aaron Farley. I graduated from the University of Maine in Farmington in the year 2011, and I've been an active classroom teacher here at Grace Christian Academy ever since. The school's been here for just over a decade now, and we help students throughout Maine, especially in the Gardner and West Gardner area. My responsibilities here in the school are kind of picking curriculum and working with the students and the teachers to make sure we are providing the best education possible. And I'm also an active classroom teacher for both science and mathematics from grade 6 to high school graduation.
What's your background as a math teacher?
So as a math teacher, I have besides my personal classroom experience, which comes out to about 13 years now, I was never a formally trained math teacher. I was a formally trained science teacher. But the way that laws work in the state of Maine and throughout the United States, because I'm a certified science teacher, in most states, I can also teach mathematics.
So you really get to look at mathematics from a practical viewpoint, like from a science viewpoint, as opposed to just like maybe a typical math teacher that was trained just as a math teacher.
Right. I'm kind of coming in from the other side. A more standardly trained math teacher would have their expertise in explaining mathematics and the proofs of mathematics and how we have arrived at them. Coming at them from the science end, I'm much more on the practical side. So, okay, guys, we're going to do this type of experiment. This is the type of math you need to know how to do in order to survive once you graduate.
Well, over the last 10 years, how many different math programs have you used, would you say, more or less?
I have used at least 3, and I've sprinkled in a couple of others when those 3 have not covered things I felt my students needed.
And then what did you hear a few months ago from one of your parents?
So a few months ago, I was approaching a parent because I knew that he had worked as a tutor before, and I was looking to get some students some math tutoring. And I approached him and said, hey, we're looking for math tutors, and I know you've tutored in the past. Would you be willing to consider working for us? And he said, yeah, I wouldn't mind helping you tutor math, but before you hire me as a tutor, you should really consider Triad Math. I was using it with my 2 grandchildren, and they really enjoyed it, and I think it would help your students as well. So that's how I met you.
As I recall, you were a little skeptical when you first met me.
Yeah, well, you're a nice guy, but just like every other person with a product, your product was the greatest thing since sliced bread's been invented. So honestly, I wanted to give it a try. I trusted my parent, and you seemed to be above board, but I was skeptical that you were going to meet all of the claims that you had made.
Made some pretty wild claims, didn't I?
You did. You told me that, for example, that they could do algebra and geometry and trigonometry all in one book at the same time, and
in one semester.
In one semester too, yeah,
or less. And well, that turned out to be true.
It has turned out to be true.
And what was one of the keys to making that possible? By the way, just so whoever's watching, I'm going to talk about practical algebra and geometry and trigonometry, the kind you need for the military or a technical career. Okay, practical. And what was one of the keys to being able to do that?
Well, the first thing that was a major key was we took the Tier 1 program, which was learning how to use the scientific calculator. I don't think there's a math classroom that doesn't have a scientific calculator, but at least when I was in school, the teachers never really taught us how to use a calculator. They just said, yeah, there's a calculator over there. You can use it if you want to. So learning how to use the calculator and having the calculator as a tool to check what I'm doing and make sure that I'm doing the operations correctly really speeds up the whole process.
Now tell them how the program works with the students, the Triad Math program with the students.
So could you be a little bit more specific in terms of?
Well, I'm the teacher, and how am I the teacher? Because I'm not live now.
Oh, I see what you mean. So the idea, or the way this works, is my students open up their laptops when they enter class, and they have a book. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of it here. I don't know if you can see it. This is the standard workbook, and the workbook is divided into several lessons. So they'll power up, and let's say they're working on Algebra Lesson 1. They can immediately log in to Dr. Dell's website, and they have access to Dr. Dell. There'll be a video tutorial there, and Dr. Dell will literally go through the lesson with them step by step. And he'll have the calculator in front of him on the camera. Okay, guys, this is what I'm putting in the calculator. This is why I'm putting it in the calculator. Now, pause the video and you try it. And then they'll pause the video. They'll give it a try. If they understand, they sit down, they try a couple practice exercises, then they go on to test out of that section. If they don't understand, they unpause the video. Dr. Dell continues to explain.
How did they respond to that program, the calculator, the first Tier 1?
The Tier 1 program was really, I think, shocking for a lot of them. At first, there were some of them that this can't be math. This is too easy. You're not teaching us anything, Mr. Farley. There's no way this is going to be useful. You've picked another stinker of a program. What's wrong with you? But as they began to use the program, and as they began to understand some of these things, they began to surprise themselves, and they began to surprise me. I'll give you one example of a student in particular. I've had one gentleman that's been in my class for several years now. I've had him since 6th grade. He's a freshman, so he's been under my care for 3 years now. He suffers from a mild form of dyscalculia. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's basically dyslexia, but for numbers. And he will periodically switch the way his operations are done or the way he has ordered his mathematics. And for 3 years, I have worked through different programs to try and get him to understand where he's making his mistake and how to unreverse the numbers that his mind reverses on him. He was sitting down and he was using the calculator, and he raised his hand, and I went over and he said, Mr. Farley, I've got a question to ask you. I said, okay, that's what I'm here for. He said, when I put the answer into the calculator this way, and he starts typing in a division problem, and I immediately recognize he's typing the division problem into the calculator backwards. He says, when I type it in this way, I get the wrong answer. I said, yup. He says, but when I type it in this way, and then he typed it in correctly, he said, I get the right answer. I said, yup. And he goes, is this what you've been trying to explain to me for the last 3 years? I'm just doing it backwards? Yup. Oh. He has hardly had to ask me a question since. He's basically gone from, he always got decent grades, B's, to basically being an A student, where he's now grasped this concept, and the calculator is a tool he's using to make sure he's lining his stuff up correctly, and he's feeling very successful. Oh my gosh, I'm not dumb. Math is something I can conquer.
Yeah, so, the psychology of a student is extremely important, as I teach in my books that I share with people. If a student's afraid of math, doesn't like math, they're not going to learn much math. But if they get to liking it, now you've got quite a number of students go through the calculator program. How did they all feel about it, react to it?
like I said at the beginning, there was some skepticism. By the end, I think they were very surprised. One of the things that I decided to do for fun is I wrote up a test of math problems that I knew before they did the calculator section they would not have dared to attempt. And I threw the test in front of them. I said, okay, guys, go ahead and try it. It was kind of a pop quiz type thing. So they took what they had learned in tier one, they did it. Not a single person scored less than an A. Every one of them got a 93 or better.
Yeah, well, as I teach people, the students and the coaches, there's only one grade in math that really matters. You got to get an A. You understand it or you don't understand it.
Yep.
And so you didn't have any students though that couldn't learn to use a calculator.
Not a one.
And how long would it take, would you say, a typical student that's starting out, a young beginning student, to master the calculator to the extent that they need to master it to move forward? How long would you guesstimate that to be?
So in a classroom setting, it took us about a month. And that's including, both the whiz kids and the struggling folks.
Well,
if you were doing it on your own, I could see a smart student finishing it in a week and a half, maybe 2.
We have, that's true. We've trained hundreds of homeschool students, and they don't have a math teacher. They just got a parent usually that's coaching them. And I'm the teacher, the parent's the coach. And we have training for the parents to know how to be coaches. We didn't have to do that with you because you've got your background, but with most situations, if you don't have a good math teacher, I'm the teacher, but you got to be the coach. And this is the tier 1 book. This is how to master the calculator. And it used to be we had to deliver this in a PDF format. You had to print them out. But what does this book cost now?
I believe we paid like $5 for that book.
Yeah, we found a printer now that prints these books out for us, so you don't have to print them out PDF notes. And this particular one, retail in one quantity is, I think, $5.99. It's from Amazon. Yep. They do the printing, but in bulk we can get them to you for less than that. So we can get these books to you usually for about $5 a piece if you buy several of them, which I think is what you guys did.
Right. We were buying them in chunks.
Now, after the calculator, it's a tool. Now, what can they do next, and what happens in tier 2?
So what happens in tier 2 is once you've mastered the calculator, now we're going to attack the 3 basic mathematics together. We're going to attack algebra first, then geometry, then trigonometry, which this was where I was like, no way, this isn't going to happen. Tier 1, yeah, we can get that through that in a month or 2. There's no way. As a traditional classroom teacher, each one of those subjects is at least a year's course. Actually, I have one of my other workbooks. So remember, the workbook I showed you at the beginning, that is algebra, geometry, and trig. Here's the traditional workbook. That's just algebra.
Hold it sideways, so we can see a little bit.
So you can see
Yeah, that's typical. By the way, what did a book like that cost you?
This cost me around $60.
And that's just for algebra?
Just for algebra. I would need to pay an additional $60 for geometry. And actually, this particular curriculum doesn't teach trigonometry, so I would have to have gone out and found a different curriculum to sprinkle in trig.
And you got all 3 of those subjects, algebra, geometry, and trig, practical, algebra, geometry, trig, in this one course, this one book. Each lesson has a tutorial video. And how long does it take some of your students now to go through tier 2?
Now, we started tier 2 around December. So it's now March. So call that 2 months. Most of my students have already finished algebra and are working in the geometry section. So I believe by the time this semester is over, we will have gone through all 3, just like you promised.
And when I tell parents in general and students that they're going to learn trigonometry, that scares a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't take trigonometry until I was a senior. It's a high-end math class.
And now, and again, I'm talking practical trigonometry now, practical, the kind you need for the military or technical career. And how many lessons are there in trigonometry? Do you remember?
Off the top of my head, I think there's 16.
No, in trigonometry.
In trigonometry.
In my lesson, trigonometry, it's 7 lessons.
Oh, okay. What's
Geometry.
16? Is
In
that
fact,
geometry?
yeah, well, yeah, 19. In fact,
19.
what I'm going to do in a minute before this is over, I'm going to show whoever's watching this a syllabus where they can go and see exactly what's covered, exactly what you're getting. So that's tier 2. Now, so you're really just kind of getting started. In tier 3, as you know, we give them some additional mathematics you need if you're going to do what on the SAT and the ACT.
Correct.
If you're going to college. And by the way, if you're not going to go to college, you only need part of tier 3.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that you don't really ever need that you'd never use, but you need them for the SAT. Now, tier 3, as you're going to find out, takes most students less than a year to go through. Depends on the student. It's self-paced. So you could have some students, as you know, go take much longer than others, and that's fine. Because what's the deal? Every time they go through a lesson,
right,
and score, they get an A on that lesson, they get, perfect score, then they move up the ladder. Have you had any students get discouraged by this program?
None. There was one student who started getting a little bit discouraged. Now, to be fair, I don't think it was necessarily the program's fault. The student has a long history of not having success in mathematics. Mm-hmm. And there was a kind of a moment where he was struggling with something, and he just kind of bowed his head and was like, this program isn't going to work for me either. I'm doomed. And this is actually a great story because I think it relates to the classroom environment as a whole. One of his classmates happened to be working on the same lesson at the same time. And he kind of understood what was going on. He was getting a good grade he was about to test out. And he kind of looked over the other student's shoulder and said, hey, you're not failing, my man. You put your decimal place in the wrong spot. And the kid looked over and he says, what do you mean? And he brought over his notes. He said, see, when you multiplied, you put the decimal place in the wrong spot. The rest of everything you did is right. You're just going to watch those points, man, and then you'll be fine. So he redid it, watched the points. Suddenly he's got an A on the lesson. He's passing this section. He's like, wait, it was that simple? It's just that kind of, I understand this. I'm not a complete knucklehead. No, you're not dumb. Math is hard. You made a mistake. Do you know how many times I mess up math? There's a reason they give the teacher an answer book.
And I tell the students that all the time, as you know, I'm always telling them, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. That's why whenever I give an exercise, there's always an answer. You get the wrong answer, go back and do it again. Watch the video again if you need to. Sometimes I got to watch it 2 or 3 times. It's a tutorial video. Most of the tutorial videos are 5 to 10 minutes long.
Yeah, I think the longest one was 15 that I've gone through so far.
And I want to point out they're not lectures. The tutorial videos where I'm telling them things. I say, pause the video, try this, try that. I ask them, seems to work pretty well. I've trained over the last few years, we've trained hundreds of homeschool students. And I found out that virtually all students can learn it. There might be 1 student in 10 that has some sort of a mental disability and can't learn math. That does happen. You don't have any in that category, but it does happen. But it's rare. But there's lots and lots and lots of students that have struggled with math, afraid of math, don't like math, and they get turned around. One of the things that's good about this calculator, as you know, is it's kinesthetic. And it's not a game exactly, but it's got that kind of quality to it.
Yeah.
That's very important. Now, the students then that get through tier 3, and that's when I use a textbook for the first time. And you've gotten a copy of that textbook, didn't you, and looked at it?
Yeah, you're talking about Simmons' book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the one textbook I use starting in tier 3. By the way, I don't use any textbook in tiers 1 and 2. Those are strictly notes in my tutorial because there's no textbook that does that. I begin to use this textbook in tier 3 and I use part of it. How much this textbook cost, you remember? You bought it at Amazon?
It was under $20.
It's under $20. Greatest teacher of the 20th century, George Simmons, wrote other more advanced textbooks that are great. I won't get into it now. But this is PreCalculus Math in a nutshell, Algebra Geometry and Trigonometry. And it's a terrific book. And I use about 20% of it in tier 3. Now, in tier 4, if you got a student who's going to go into science engineering, now we're going to go into algebra and geometry and trigonometry and all other pre-calculus much deeper. And you've got a math background, you're a math teacher, and I sent you a copy of that notebook to look
Yes,
at,
you did.
which you haven't got. What do you think of the Tier 4 notebook?
Well, I opened up the Tier 4 notebook and I was so excited at the thought of my students being able to get into that in high school. Most of the stuff in the Tier 4 notebook, I never had a chance to touch before college. And the stuff on the second half of the notebook, towards the end, when we're really getting into the graphing and the more advanced stuff, even after 5 years of college as a math and science teacher, they didn't teach that stuff to me. So I was immensely excited when I saw that.
Now, let's tell them why. It's not because I'm such a great teacher. I'm a pretty good teacher, but that's not the real reason. What is the reason Tier 4 does the things that are really just beyond what most math teachers have ever seen?
Wolfram Alpha, man, that thing is amazing.
It's a new tool that was introduced to the world in 2009. It's called Wolfram Alpha. And it does to pre-calculus and calculus and advanced math what the calculator did to arithmetic. And I start teaching that early in Tier 4. And that lets a student now learn things that in the old manual way were very difficult. 7 or 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. With Wolfram Alpha, they're like a 1 or a 2. And that's why you've seen things now, and you're going to be going through it yourself as your students do down not probably next year.
Right.
This book is absolutely incredible. Now, I have homeschoolers that have gone through this. And I have one in particular from Florida that went to the Air Force Academy for an interview, and they couldn't believe how much math he knew. It blew their minds. They put him in a junior class. He's a 17-year-old high school student. They put him in a junior level class just to sit in on it. And he was right up with them, and they couldn't believe it. Because then in Tier 5, what do I teach?
Oh,
Tier 5 is calculus. This is beyond no high school today teaches this. There's 2 calculus. There's differential. Some high schools teach that. Then there's integral. That's so hard no high school does. With Wolfram Alpha, that whole thing can be done. And most students go through this in about 1 semester. Then no high schools ever, ordinary high school, has ever taught differential equations, which are the workhorse of science engineering. And we do that in Tier 6, all thanks to Wolfram Alpha. So when a student gets through our program, if they're interested in science and engineering, they call it STEM, S-T-E-M, there's nothing to compare to it. I'm sure you didn't ever have any of the programs you've used in the past even attempted to teach that kind of material.
Nothing.
Fair statement?
That nothing even close. And I've worked, I mean, just to be clear here, I have worked in public school settings as well. And public school programs have money given to them by the government to improve their STEM program. This book, that type of STEM ability blows the stuff I was using in public schools completely out of the water.
Yeah, it does. It's not the teacher's fault, by the way. It's not even the school's fault. It's the math education community that's created all these textbooks with all these old manual tools in them, which is all we had up until 2009. You had to use the old manual tools because that's all we had. I'm talking for calculus and complex numbers and differential equations. And then this new tool came along, changes everything. And there's no textbook that I know of today that's done it. If I published a textbook today, no high school teacher's ever seen it. I mean, nobody would adopt it. And they don't want to give up their old books because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. How much money? Let's talk about the cost of the program. Now, you're a math teacher, but the truth is, would a school have to have a math teacher to use my program?
I think a math teacher would certainly help. I mean, if you've got a math teacher, you don't have to fire them. But if you're struggling to find a teacher, I know personally, I help in the hiring of staff here. And one of the major kind of sticking points with people, yeah, I'd love to be a teacher. I'm great at history. I'm great at English. I can't do math. right? And they feel that they're very much inadequate to be a classroom teacher because they can't, they do not have formal math training. With a program like this, if you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you can coach. You can coach.
Yeah, we teach that. I have a book called Golden Rule Math for All God's Children, which I give to the schools, and it has chapters on coaching in here because most of our business historically in the last few years has been homeschool, and parents aren't math teachers. Almost none of them ever are. But I teach them how to be a coach. There's 3 chapters in here on coaching. And if you're a math teacher, that's great to be a coach then, because right now, what are you doing more of with all your students? Are you teaching them math, or are you coaching them?
For me personally, it's more coaching, right? It's more
Yeah.
of a, I'm sitting here, okay, I don't understand what's going on here. What can I do? You need to practice this thing. It's in lesson whatever. Do you understand, Dr. Dell? Do you need me to find you more problems? Right? As a math teacher, to me, it feels less like I'm doing the teacher thing in terms of, come on, guys, you got to get out the textbook, you got to do all this stuff, you got to, hey, don't get out of your desk, obey me, kind of the disciplinary stuff. And it's more like a game. It's more like coaching basketball or football, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you miss every field goal. You're going out there and you're going to kick field goals, right? And it's set up in such a way that until they master that technique, they're not going on to the next technique.
Yeah, the facts are, if a school today hired me to be their math teacher, I'm a PhD in math. I've taught math at all levels, as you know. But if they hired me to be their teacher, school today, I would use this program and I would act as a coach.
Yep.
Because my tutorial videos is something a student can watch. They can pause it. They can back it up. They can rewatch it. And you can't do that with a live teacher.
Right.
You can't control a live teacher that way. Say, hey, teacher, tell me that again. Oh, well, do it again. We'll do it again. Well, let me wait. I'll do it tomorrow. I've blah, blah, blah. So I would actually use this program and act as a coach, even though obviously I can teach it. But the truth is I can't teach it to a live student as well as my tutorial video does.
Yeah, there's a certain level of inefficiency teaching in any classroom, right? Because you got 25 students and some of them understand and they want to go on to the next thing, but you can't help them with the next thing because you're helping Susie or Johnny over here because they still haven't mastered this subject.
And
so
some
now,
of them,
now you've got these folks that have got it. Can I move on to the next lesson? Did you get a 100 on the test? Go ahead, move on. Don't wait for me. Start on the next section. I'll come in and check on you in 20 minutes. Okay, we're going to go back. We're going to do example number 10 again, because, or whatever. And then I can.
You haven't had to use this yet, but just so you know, when somebody's in my program, a student's in my program, there's a forum they can go to and ask questions.
That's true.
So the homeschoolers, the parents they're not math teachers, and they're not going to learn math. Math, and you're going to learn more. In fact, you're going to learn in the next year or two, as your students are going through tiers 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, you're going to learn all kinds of math you don't know, because you're going to find it interesting.
Absolutely.
You're quite capable of learning it. Now, the old manual stuff was hard. What was your experience with integral calculus, calculus 2, back when you were a student?
Oh, my goodness. So calculus, well, I never even took calculus 2. I had such a difficulty with calculus 1 that I actually bombed out of it the first time, and I had to go and hire a tutor. And after taking calculus multiple times, I managed to pull a C on my second time through with a tutor. I've just kind of skimmed some of the calculus stuff in tier 4, and just punching it into Wolfram Alpha and looking at what comes out would have saved me a lot of time, effort, and tears and blood, I guess.
Yeah, there's really nothing compared to it.
There's nothing to compare to it.
I'm a PhD in math, as you know, and I've taught advanced theoretical math, and I've taught one of the places I've taught at many different schools many in the past, but I taught at an engineering school for 4 years in Indiana, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. And most students, they have very good students there. High is a very high quality school. Most of the students would get through differential calculus. They could get through it.
Yep.
The barrier then was integral calculus. That's a hard subject when manual tools. And that literally flunked more kids out of engineering school than any other subject. It was like a barrier subject. In fact, the best electronics engineer in Terre Haute, and I used him for another business I had, and he had flunked out of Rose. And I found out why was that course. Well, now with the Wolfram Alpha tool, it's easy peasy.
Yeah, it's night and day different.
It's like if you want to dig a big long ditch, 3 feet wide and 6 feet deep and long, the way it's taught today, the manual way, is pick an axe and shovel. Wolfram Alpha is like a modern backhoe.
Yeah.
And you just go down and you dig that thing out. It's so easy. Now you got to learn to use it. Wolfram Alpha is like any tool. You got to learn to use it. And that's what I'm teaching in Tier 4. You're going to find that out. People could learn it on their own. It's just like the calculator. You got to learn how to use it.
Yeah, but who's going to sit there and read the instruction manual?
And figure it out. Well, and here's the thing. Half of the things on this calculator you'll never use. I don't teach the stuff that you'll never use. I teach the stuff you need to know for algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. There's a whole bunch of stuff this calculator does I don't teach because you'll never use it. The HYP key, HYP, that's for hyperbolic trig functions. Well, I've never used one, so I figure you're not going to use one. And I've done, and why am I going to teach you hyperbolic trig functions when you're never going to use them? And there's lots of other examples of that. Well, anyway, so what do you think as a school, first of all, how do you think the quality of your math education is now with Triad Math compared to the best thing you've ever done in the past?
I don't think they will compare. Within a year or two, as the students go through these lessons and these things, I expect our standardized test scores and everything else to just spike, go right through the roof, and be beyond anything I could imagine. There is nothing like this.
What about the cost of it in terms of total cost?
In terms of total cost, you're certainly not going to spend any more than you would spend on a standard curriculum. In my opinion, I have spent far less money. Let's use that calculator you were just showing for an example, okay? I can pick up a copy of that calculator from Amazon or from Walmart for 10 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught us how to do everything on that calculator. That's the calculator that I need to go through all 6 tiers of your program, right?
As far as calculators go, this is the only one you'll ever use.
It's the only one I'm ever going to use. So up until this point, I've been using
graphing calculators are obsolete now.
Well, that's what I'm going to go to. Up until this point, we've been using graphing calculators. Mm-hmm. A good graphing calculator will run you somewhere between $150 and $200 and something.
And it's hard to use.
It's very hard to use.
Yeah. And they were great. By the way, there was a time when they were the best tool. Back in the 90s when they came out, in the early 2000s, that was the best tool.
Absolutely. I would have never made it through calculus without it.
But when Wolfram Alpha hit, every graphing calculator is obsolete overnight. When the first scientific calculator came out 50 years ago, the tools that were being used were slide rules and log tables and trig tables. Scientific calculator came out. In today's dollars, the first one was $2,500. It was Hewlett-Packard 35. Overnight, the manual tools were obsolete. Now, it took them several years to give up because they didn't want to get rid of their books and all, but they had to give up. Now, the calculator was $2,500 50 years ago in today's dollars. Today, this is a much better calculator for $10. Okay. Graphing calculators came out and they would do things that you can't do with this calculator. There's a lot of things you can do with a graphing calculator you can't do with this calculator.
True.
But with Wolfram Alpha, you can do more and better. And by the way, how much does Wolfram Alpha cost?
Hasn't cost a dime.
It's free on the internet. Now, that's the bottom line of it is. So if you're talking to the leaders of another school, what are you going to say to them? If they call you, what would you say to a leader of another school?
If they called me and said, "Hey, talk to me about this program, should I use it or not?" I would offer for them to come to my classroom and watch my students. I would say, "Come and watch my kids. Yes, I approve of this. Look at what they're capable of." Actually, I'll tell you a story. I had a math problem that I was working on because I like to work through the book with my students. And I was at my whiteboard, just kind of puttering away, hammering out this. Most of these students wouldn't have seen this type of math problem in a traditional math book until they were a junior. Okay. It's just kind of basic Algebra 2 stuff, but they wouldn't have seen it yet. And they're working away and they looked up and they said, "Mr. Farley, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I was just solving this math problem. You guys are going to come to it in a couple of chapters. I just wanted to make sure I remembered how to do it." And they said, "That doesn't look too hard. I bet you we could do it." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. You haven't learned this yet, but if you want to do a little extrapolating from what you know already, and you want to try and give me an answer to this math problem, go for it." And they said, "Okay, what do we do if we get the answer right?" I said, "All right, if you get the answer right, I'll give you $20. I'm out $20."
Well, yeah. My estimate, by the way, on cost is that for most schools, first of all, they won't need to hire a good math teacher. They only need a good coach. Now, if they got a good math teacher, that's great. The math teacher will love it and do what you're doing. A lot of schools have a hard time getting a good math teacher. Very difficult. In fact, there's no high school math teacher that probably you could hire today that knows what you're going to learn from this. I didn't know it till I went through developed the program. Okay. My guess would be the total cost of your math education program is going to probably reduce by 50%.
I haven't run the full numbers yet, but I can tell you we're spending vastly less than what we were spending before.
And what's important is you're not going to have to go out and hire a good math teacher. You just need a good coach. And a lot of people can be good coaches. You don't have to know the math to be a coach. The other thing is about the schools, and this is very important. If students can help each other, that's even better. Let the ones a little more advanced help the ones struggling. You get that one example you gave is a great example. Because not only did it help the student that was struggling, it gave confidence and good feeling to the student that helped him.
Absolutely.
In fact, I've always said myself, I don't really feel like I've learned something till I've taught it. So I've been tutoring students all my life. I started tutoring students when I was in high school. I'd learned something, and 2 or 3 weeks later, I'd teach some of my other students struggling with it, and so on and so forth. And then I've done that all my life. And so the students can help each other. And here's the big thing is how many, well, I think you answered already, but how many students have you had that are now failing math or not doing well in math?
There's not a single student that is failing math currently. And I not only would I, don't get me wrong, good grades are important, right? But the other thing that I want to stress here is you don't have to necessarily like math to enjoy the program. I have had students come to me because obviously we were doing this on a trial basis. So I took a smattering of my oldest students, the ones that I had taught the most already, and said, "Guys, we're going to try this." But my younger students who were new and who were still struggling, I had not switched over. And as the older ones improved, they began helping the younger ones because the younger ones would ask me a question and the older one would say, "Mr. Farley, let me teach them that. I figured it out." And there was an excitement there.
Yeah.
And then the younger one asks, "How come he knows this, but I don't?" "Oh, I've been trying a new math program with him. I was thinking about trying it with you. What do you think? When can I start?" So, Doc, you don't know this yet, but UPS, whoever delivers, delivered the Tier 7 or the Tier 1 math books for the 6th and 7th graders this morning.
Oh.
And several of them saw me carrying in the box. And they said, Mr. Farley, is that the Dr. Dell program? Is that did you get the books like you promised you were going to get the books? First of all, as a teacher, I've never had a student beg me to give them a math book. Right? Like
Amazing.
and I popped up, I said, I don't know. I ordered the books. This is a box. I don't know what's in it. I pull out my knife. I open up the box. Yeah, these are your textbooks. Cool. You can finish up the lesson you're on, and I'll give them to you on Monday. Can we take them home? What, you want me to give them to you so you can do math homework over the weekend? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Are you a teenager?
Well, one of the things I talk about, I think you also got two of these books now, didn't you? Golden Rule Math.
It did.
For all God's
looking
children.
really forward.
And one of the things I talk about here is intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. Extrinsic is when you got to bribe them to do something. Usually grades are used. Well, you study this and pass and to get you a good grade and, blah, blah, blah. And it's extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is when they enjoy doing it and they want to do it. And what I find is 80% of the students, of the homeschool students we teach, I'm guessing, develop enough intrinsic motivation that they enjoy studying it. It's like, why do kids play certain games? It's intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, they enjoy
They don't, well, so math it's like a game almost. It's not a game, but it's like a game. And then they see applications of it. And I say, look, if you want to be a carpenter or a landscaper or go into any kind of technical subject or go to the military, if you go through this math, you're going to be so well prepared that you're going to have a heck of a career.
Absolutely.
What holds people back today in the technical subjects, whether it's a trade school, an apprentice program, the military, what holds them back is math. They're not matherate. It's like, if you can't read and write, well, what are you going to do? We all know literacy is important because you got to be able to read and at least read instructions. Well, math is that way for technical subjects. If you don't know math, you just can't learn hydraulics or pneumatics or landscaping or name it, any of that stuff. So, and they understand that. And of course, I give them problems that are what I call practical math. Now, let me take a minute here and just, of course, you know all this, but whoever's watching this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen. And if you're watching this video, I invite you to go to my personal website, which is craighane.com. That's me, craighane.com. And on this personal website, I have a free gift I give you, a lot of free stuff. I got a video library with tons of free math videos. But you come down here and you click on this syllabus, and that'll open up a PDF, and that'll show you what you're learning. Now, this is tier 1. We've been talking about the calculator. There's a lesson for calculator, right?
Yep.
16 lessons. And when they learn those 16 lessons, and most students learn it, I've had students go through this in a week, but let's say 2 or 3 weeks. Then I give them some pre-algebra in case they've forgotten the rules of arithmetic. That's tier 1. That almost without fail, that gets their psychology turned around. They like math now. They have confidence. What did you say? The guys thought it was too easy.
Absolutely, they did.
It's like, well, how can I do this? Well, now tier 2, here's algebra. How many lessons do you think you need for practical algebra? Well, you show that algebra book cost $60. It was a big, thick book.
Yeah, there's 128 lessons.
10 lessons. Out of that 128 lessons, there's all kinds of theoretical stuff they'll never use. There's all kinds of practical manual tools they'll never use. This is what you need. Now, algebra by itself is a tool. And now what are you going to use it with? We're going to use it with geometry. And here's the 19 lessons of geometry. And it's practical stuff. How long is something? What is the area? What's the volume? Now, there's a problem, and you know all this. The thing you can't do with algebra and geometry is deal with angles. There's a few you can, but that's when you need trigonometry. Now, trigonometry scares most people. 7 lessons, and you're done. And you'll be able to do problems that very, very few high school graduates can do. I've got a 1-question test. Take a triangle, take an arbitrary lengths of the three sides and calculate its area and its angles. You'll be able to do that in 1 minute after you've gone through this program using the calculator and trigonometry. Then tier 3 is getting ready for the SAT. Now that's when I start using Simmons' book.
Right.
But I still use notes. I use notes because he doesn't do everything. SAT prep. By the way, the SAT and the ACT are, in my opinion, are very bad tests, but we have to live with them. So I'm teaching what they need to know to do well on those tests.
And I would, if I can steal your thunder a little bit, I would add the calculator that you're learning to use in tier 1, you're allowed to use on tests like the SAT.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you're learning a tool that you can take with you into battle.
Yeah, that's right. Now, if you're going to go into science and engineering, let's say you've gone through this. Let's say you score a perfect score on the SAT. Perfect score. Are you ready to go to a good engineering school, MIT or Purdue or Caltech? No. You need a much deeper level. Now I do geometry. I still use Simmons' book, go a little bit more geometry, but then what I do, A5 in algebra, introduction to Wolfram alpha. Now, from that point forward, I'm using Wolfram alpha. For example, I do conic sections next, which are extremely important in science. You got to understand parabolas and hyperbolas and ellipses. Wolfram alpha makes it easy. Functions and graphs, logarithms, exponentials, trigonometry at a much deeper level now. Now you're graphing and frequencies and all that. Something that's never done in high school math probably today is complex numbers. And I have 11 lessons that do it the way Richard Feynman said it ought to be taught, using the Euler equation. You're going to learn a lot. You don't know any of this because you weren't taught this in school. You've been through science, but this is critical for science. You absolutely must understand complex numbers in order to go into engineering and science.
Absolutely.
Then I have additional thing. Then now that's tier 4. Now most students, tier 4 is a 500-page book. It's a thick notebook, 500 pages. But most students go through it. It depends on the student. But a student that's going to go to a good engineering school or science school will usually do tier 4 in about 1 year. It's self-paced, so it can take longer or less. Now we do calculus, differential calculus, 12 lessons and you're through it. Wolfram alpha makes it easy. It's not too hard manually. Most students can get through it. But now integral calculus, this is what flunks everybody out manually, but Wolfram alpha makes it easy. 30 lessons and you're through calculus. You'll know all the calculus you need. In fact, you'll know more calculus than you'll need to go to a lot of these schools. Differential equations, that's never done at high school. 14 lessons and you're through differential equations. And by the way, manually, it's extremely difficult. Differential equations manually is very, very difficult. Wolfram alpha makes it very easy. So that's what the program is, and that's what you're doing. And so when your students get done with this program, they're going to know more math than any student coming out of any public high school, probably in the United States of America. And I wrote another book called Why and How and Why Public School Math is Destroying the USA. If you got any doubts about what I'm talking about, go to Amazon and you can buy this book for $4.80. I'm talking to whoever's watching this video.
Yep.
And this explains why the current public school math is being taught today. And why is it destroying us? Because it's not teaching the students the math they need to go into technical careers. We need today literally hundreds of thousands of students that can do practical math, and a lot more that could do, and also students could do STEM math. And that explains all of why that is today. Now, it's a controversial book. Math educators will hate this. Chapters 19, 20, 21, and 22 are the meat of the book that really explain the reason why public school math is failing in the United States. You haven't read this book yet, have you? You've read part of it?
I've read part of it because you sent me a PDF copy.
Yeah.
So mine should be here in the mail.
Yeah, you should. You ordered one the other day and you haven't got it yet. I'm surprised you haven't got it yet.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Amazon prints them out. Well, anyway, that's the story. So what have I not told? What have we not discussed that a leader of a school would want to know?
Well, there's one more thing that I think I would want to know going into this. And What I would tell you is if you're considering this, give it a try. Pick up the tier one program, try it. The tier one program doesn't cost hardly anything. It's most of the time Doc is passing it out at a discounted price or free. See if the way that he is instructing is useful to your students. Try it. What's the worst that can happen? If your students are struggling in math, you're looking for something that is you're going to improve their way of learning. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, you can always go back to what wasn't working before.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what you said is good advice. Anytime I sell anybody my training, it's money back guarantee. If it doesn't work, they get their money back. What a school really should do is they should take, if it's a big school with lots and lots of students and they're not sure they want to do this, they should take a few students that are just beginning, a few that are struggling, a few that are good students, and put them into the program and try it out and prove it. Let the students prove it. The proof of the pudding's in the eating, obviously.
Absolutely.
But here's my point. Aaron is a math teacher. He's been through the whole system for over a decade. He's taught math. He studied math. He's come from a science perspective. And I would say Aaron probably knows about as much math as most high school math teachers know, which isn't very much. That's not meant to be an insult to Aaron or any other high school math teacher. You learn what you've been taught, right? And you learn what the books have got. Now, Aaron, a year from now or 2 years from now is going to know a lot more math because he's a math teacher. You don't have to do that, though. You can be a coach. Some schools aren't going to have math teachers. They were lucky to have you. They were very lucky to have you. I was amazed when I found out from the contacts we had that Grace Christian Academy had a knowledgeable math teacher. That was wonderful.
Yeah. No, we're very fortunate. We have several wonderfully highly educated professors here.
Yeah, you do, and you guys are working at I know you're doing it as a labor of love, and you're not doing it to get rich. Anyway, that's anything else that we ought to share.
The other thing that I would share is that I really love the way the program is organized. It's very matter of fact, one step at a time. Could you bring up the syllabus again real quick? I would just like to point out one lesson as an example.
Yeah. Which lesson do you want?
So if you would scroll all the way back up to the top, go into tier one, and I want to say it's like lesson 6. It's on it's in the pre-algebra section.
In pre-algebra, okay.
Yeah, it's lesson 6 right there. Fractions, A, B, and C, D rules. Okay. I will tell you right now, I've been teaching math for 13 years. The vast majority, I'm spitballing here. I've never actually done the numbers out, but I'm going to say probably 60, 70% of the people that I have bombed out of Algebra 1 don't know the fraction rules that you teach in lesson 6. They've been taught them or they didn't understand them the first way through. And now they're bombing out of algebra because I have to use fractions to rearrange the problem. So the way this is set up, it's very systematic in terms of targeting struggling students and filling in holes. And that's absolutely priceless as a classroom teacher because I can use my experience and go, okay, usually people that are struggling in this area don't know this previous rule. You're struggling in A2, A3, A4. Take this book, go do P6, then come back to me and tell me if you don't understand this.
Well, thank you. I've had that comment before. In fact, I had a student from Texas, and he was a homeschooler, but he also wanted to go to a private school. And he went to the private school after he'd done my homeschooling up through tier 2. And then he was taking math in the private school, and he was way ahead of his classmates. And one of the things he told me was he had a very expensive graphing calculator. And he said, guess what? My graphing calculator won't do fractions like this $10 calculator does.
No, they won't.
Which
Not even close.
I didn't
I
know
uh,
that. I didn't know that.
I actually pulled my old graphing calculators out because now that I have the ones for the program, I don't use them anymore. I've put them in the storage cabinet. I pulled them out and I tried to do some of the basic problems from tier one and tier two with my graphing calculator, which that was, that was the golden standard, my lifeblood through college. And it took me longer than that little $10 Walmart calculator. And some of the stuff, the ability to switch it between fractions and decimals, for example,
Yeah.
you'd be in the menu scrolling through stuff, whereas on the little $10 calculator, it's a button press.
Yeah. Back when I was putting the program together quite a few years ago, I went and evaluated all the inexpensive calculators. And I chose this one because it was the best of the bunch of all the ones I could evaluate. And of course, it's acceptable on the SAT, which was very important. It had to be too. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And the last thing I will just tell you here, here's geometry, and you probably don't know this yet, but the question is, now all these things are about solving geometry. How long is something? What's the area? What's the volume?
Right.
Of all these lessons, which do you think is the one that will be used the most in most technical fields? And I've applied these to all sorts of technical fields, and I'm not trying to trick you here. But which one of these lessons do you think is probably the most applicable of all the geometry lessons? What would you guess?
Man, I would pick something related to either triangles or circles because I do that
all right,
every
you're right.
day.
That's good. Now what let's take triangles. Which would you say?
G5, Pythagorean theorem.
That's what most people say, and that's not true. What is really used more than anything is similar triangles, because that's where you get ratios of sides. Now, the Pythagorean theorem is the most famous one, but similar triangles, I probably use that more than anything else in geometry, because you're always comparing two triangles that are similar. That means they have the same angles, but you want to know what the sides are, and you're using ratios. And so G6 is probably the one. Now, again, that's just an opinion. I can't prove that. But that's extreme. And by the way, you'll notice what people will notice if they're math teachers, there's no proofs in there on like congruent triangles. That's something you do in Euclidean geometry for theoretical math, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm not teaching proofs. Now, I do give heuristic arguments of why these things are true when it's appropriate to make them under, but we don't do formal proofs. Anyway, enough of that. Okay. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. Just other than a thank you. This is a wonderful program. I've really enjoyed using it.
Well, I want to thank you for being a leader and willing to try it, improve it, and demonstrate it, and share this with other schools, because there's a lot of skepticism. After all, when you first heard about it, I think the word you used with me is, I hope you're not a used car salesman.
Yeah, those were my exact words. Yes.
And that's a good thing, because most of things that are told about math is bunk. It's not true. And just because somebody said, I mean, everybody says their program's the best, right? Everybody's going to say that.
Sure.
So the real proof of the pudding's in the proof of it. As far as I'm concerned, and I know it's great for homeschool. There's nothing to compare to. I thought it would be for your school, but quite frankly, your experience has been even better than I thought it would be. I've just been amazed by, because you and I have frequent meetings. You tell me how it's going. I go, oh my God, it's even better than I thought. And I think that's going to be true of any school. 90% of all students can learn math when it's taught properly, with the right pedagogy and the right content. Those are the two things, pedagogy and content. And pedagogy means self-paced and all the things we've talked about. Content's the content we're talking about.
Right.
And then what those two things do is get your psychology right. As you point out, the psychology is everything, right? And if this has done anything to your students, it's the most dramatic thing it's done, what is probably improved the psychology of a lot of your students.
Yeah. If I was going to say the number one thing that it's done, and quite frankly, if this is the only thing it does, for most of them that don't go to college, this is a valuable skill. They have learned that they are capable if they apply themselves.
That's right.
They have gained the willingness to attempt something hard, to grapple with it, and to move forward.
Yeah. In this day and age, a high percentage of our students will not go to college for lots of different reasons. and they don't need to. If you go into a technical field today and learn, and you got to start with the math background, then you go into a technical field, you'll end up making a job, $50,000 to $100,000 a year job.
Yep.
No college, apprentice program, maybe a tech school, maybe the military, whatever. And if you got the math background, you'll learn the technical skill. There's 1,000 different technical fields. Okay, there's 1,000. I mean, I say 1,000, there's a whole bunch of them. And that's what we need in this country. That makes our economy great. We're rebuilding, we're reindustrializing in the age we live in. And what's happening is we have tools to use. They have to learn the tool. And so by learning the calculator and Wolfram Alpha, they're learning to learn. And then they can learn, then they learn the more advanced tools. There's going to be tools 5 years from now that don't exist today, but you got to learn to learn. And that's the psychology of it and all that. So, well, anyway, Aaron, I want to thank you so much.
No, absolutely. And you know, just one more thing. For those of you that are college bound, don't think that you can skip this, right? These are the fundamental skills. If I had known this stuff before I went to college, it would have saved me a whole year's worth of time. You mess up a class in college, it starts getting real expensive real fast.
Well, and here's the other thing I'll tell you. If you're going to college, you go through tier 3, and that'll get you a good score on the SAT and the ACT. If you're not interested in science and engineering, you don't need any more math. Now, they might make you take some in college, depending on what college you go to and what they make you take, but you won't need much more. And you'll be pretty well prepared for whatever they make you take. If you're going into science and engineering, STEM, now you need tests 4, 5, and 6. And the truth of the matter is, when you get done with that, when you go to college, you go right into the advanced science courses in engineering. You don't need the math the college is teaching. You know it already. In fact, a lot of colleges aren't teaching it. They're still teaching old manual stuff. And that's not good. You don't need that old manual stuff. And I wouldn't take it. In fact, when I get a student that goes through tier 6, 5 and 6, I will help counsel them to go into college to make sure they don't have to take the wrong stuff at college.
Absolutely.
I mean, I work with my students pretty closely. And so they won't need to take calculus and differential equations in college, especially the old manual tools will be teaching them what they'll never use. And the science and engineering departments will let them take the advanced stuff.
Right.
They'll let them skip the math. And
well, and even if they want a math career, many of them, the colleges allow you to test out of the math. Oh, you think you know what we're going to teach in Calculus 1? Here's a test. They're not a whole lot different from the SAT.
Well, but that won't work because they're going to make you learn the old manual techniques. I would just say, if you're going to be a math major, start taking math beyond calculus right away. Just sign up for the advanced courses and away you go. And once you get a math professor, you're taking a more advanced course. I mean, you're ready for linear algebra, for example. I mean, I could give them some advice on that because I've taught all those courses: topology, linear algebra, modern algebra, whatever. Usually they're like junior level courses. You jump right into those. And once you do well on that, they're not going to make you take the old other stuff. And I'll tell them how to do that. I advise students, if you're going through my program and you go through all 6 tiers, I'll give you some advice on go to college and what to do there. And you won't have to take obsolete stuff. Believe me, the colleges today are so desperate for good students, they're not going to make you take a bunch of obsolete stuff. Say, well, no, if you're going to make me, I'm going to go to a different college because it's competition, right? They all want good students.
Right.
And okay, good enough. Anything else? I think that's it.
No, sir. I think that's it. Covers it.
Now, remember, Grace Christian Academy and Aaron Farley, and if all else, I guess if some leader of some school wanted to call you, or they could email you, right?
Oh, sure, they could.
If they email me, go to craighane.com and there's my contact information. I will come to me. I will give you Aaron's contact information. I don't want him bugged by a whole bunch of people, but if you're a leader of a school and you want to talk to Aaron, I'll give you his contact information. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it very much. And I'm going to stop the recording, and hopefully then I'll see you soon, Aaron. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.